What is it the writer says? Tell the story you know.
I don't know that writer.
In an industry like Hollywood, to see two screenwriters signing the same script isn't a big deal, definitely not something to make a movie about. Art sometimes asks for more than one brain in action. Sometimes high art, like Scary Movie 2, will demand 7. Anyway, it's no surprise that in 1941, when director Orson Welles debuted his first movie, soon to be considered a cinematic masterpiece, Citizen Kane, no one really questioned why there was a second writer above the director's own name in the credits. Fast forward to the 90s, director David Fincher decided to question it and proposed to make a movie about real-life screenwriter Herman J. Mankiewicz, aka Mank. That's the guy that was sharing Welles' credits. Not only that, Fincher also wanted the movie to be shot all in black and white, and basically just use a lot of Citizen Kane's aesthetic. But mind you, that was early 90s Fincher, so not the acclaimed director of Fight Club, Gone Girl and Social Network, but that was David Fincher, director of about 37 music videos and Alien 3. As you can well imagine, the project was cancelled. Finally, we reach 2020, when suddenly black and white movies start to be considered less old-fashioned and more potentially Oscar-worthy, and David Fincher gets a green light from Netflix to finally have the movie produced exactly the way he wanted it made. And Netflix seems to have been wise to do so.
Herman Mankiewicz, New York playwright and drama critic.
Turned humble screenwriter, Mr. Hearst.
Mank landed 11 nominations at 2021's Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor for Gary Oldman and Best Supporting Actress for Amanda Seyfried. In the movie, Gary Oldman plays Mank throughout two parallel narratives. In the first one, we watch Mank's experiences in Hollywood in the 30s, as his strong personality and drinking issues causes him to have a number of fights with studio moguls over their politics. In a second narrative, 42-year-old Mank is hired by director Orson Welles and uses his experiences in Hollywood to write his greatest work, Citizen Kane. Seyfried plays Marion Davies, who was probably the only actress of the golden age of Hollywood considering her IMDb page. But seriously, the woman worked in more than 50 different movies throughout her career. She was also secretly, but not so secretly since it was the 30s, the mistress of William Randolph Hearst, a powerful media magnate and the real-life inspiration for the main character in Citizen Kane. Davies was also probably, the inspiration for the term rosebud, but you can check the movie to understand in what way.
We would like to keep this video as PG-13 as possible in order to avoid copyright issues. Thank you very much.
If Gary Oldman delivers a stable and kind of expected performance, what Seyfried does to her otherwise secondary part is surprising. Maybe it's the fact that she and Oldman share a lot of chemistry, which makes every scene with the duo the highlight of the movie, or maybe it's her subtle acting during the dinner scene, which by the way took 100 takes to film, like literally 100 takes. Fincher is a perfectionist, everyone knows that, but 100 takes. That's probably the reason why everyone looked so genuinely fed up with Oldman's drunk speech.
A show of hands. Sir, who knows what a vacuum cleaner is?
Martin, would you set a place for Mr. Mankiewicz somewhere where he might get some air?
Anyway, sorry, long story short, Seyfried is definitely one of the best parts of this movie.
You're blushing.
Am not.
R2.
Am not.
R2, I can see it.
Watching Mank, you might get the impression that you're seeing something from an older time, and it's not just the fact that there's only white people in it. That would be because Fincher made sure to use a bunch of strategies that would make the audience feel like they weren't watching a 2020 movie. According to Donald Graham Burt, the film's production designer, Fincher wanted the movie to be like you were in a vault and came across Citizen Kane, and next to it was Mank. He wanted it to seem like something made from the period. He didn't want viewers to have a clear idea of when we shot it. Let's unpack that. First of all, the movie carries some clear elements of screwball comedy, and before you ask, that's basically a genre of movie created in the early 1930s that got very popular during the 40s. It's those old comedy movies with very fast-paced, witty dialogues, like a black and white Gilmore Girls, only with less coffee and more smoking. You might have heard of a comedy movie called His Girl Friday. That's from the 40s, also a screwball comedy. And I mentioned it here because not only is it a good example, but also real-life Charles Lederer and Ben Hecht, who wrote the movie, can actually be seen during the writer room scene in Mank.
You all remember the Algonquin cabin boy, Charlie Lederer?
They filmed using current digital cameras, because analog ones are just impractical really, but they applied these little circles on the corner of the frame to create the illusion of old times real changes. Night scenes were filmed during the day, so they could use the day for night technique, which means you either underexpose the image when filming or darken the scene during post-production. They did that because the technique was very commonly used during the 40s, since at that time cameras couldn't actually film at night. Also, during the movie, every scene starts with a typed-out note like a script, not only a nod to the profession they're talking about in the story, but also because it can kind of remind you of old silent movies where the location and time of day would be shown in cards in the beginning of every scene. The original score, also nominated for an Oscar, was composed by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. And if you think it's funny for a psycho-thriller director like Fincher to take on a Hollywood classic drama piece, you should go to Reznor and Ross' IMDb page. The composers completely changed their usual style, going from this to period authentic instrumentation from the 1940s.
Hello.
And even Ren Klyce's sound design was done in a way that gave the audience the feeling of watching a 40s movie. According to Fincher, everything has been compressed and made to sound like the 1940s. The music has been recorded with older microphones, so it has a sort of sizzle and wheeze around the edges.
This is Mrs. Alexander. She types 100 perfect words a minute and takes dictation like a clairvoyant. Rita Alexander, Herman Mankiewicz.
You get it from strings, but you mostly get it from brass. What you're hearing is a revival house, an old theater playing a movie.
This is Mrs. Alexander. She types 100 perfect words a minute and takes dictation like a clairvoyant.
All in all, Mank is a movie about movie making, which makes it interesting for people who know Hollywood history or someone who is, simply put, a movie nerd, like us. The fast-paced dialogue and heartfelt acting makes it enjoyable to watch, but if you ask me, which no one really did, it's the efforts the creators went through to make a real 1940s movie experience that turned Mank into a good movie.